Hi, this is the first Excel tutorial video for General Chemistry Lab in the fall of 2018 at Lewis University. In this video, we're going to be covering some of these topics. There might be a second video to get to the second half of these topics. As we go along, I'll be time-stamping these so that we know when each tutorial piece comes up, and you can skip to there later if there's a certain topic that you need to revisit. The first thing we'll talk about is moving data. So if you have a bunch of data, as we do here, and maybe I want to put something in cell A1, like my name and the date, I could cut and paste. So for example, I can cut and paste any single cell or multiple cells if you'd like. But a more efficient way to do this is to select all the data that you'd like to move and go to the edge of the highlighted section. So you'll see that my plus sign, cursor plus sign, turns into a hand. And if I click and hold and drag that data, I can move that data to wherever I'd like. And this is going to be super handy for moving large blocks of data or just shifting things over so you can add more data in between. Maybe I had a trial 2.5. I can want to move those over and add a different trial there. Or it does keep the references when you do calculations, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing that we should pay attention to is the name, date, and partner that needs to be in every spreadsheet that you turn in lab. So in the cell A1, you should have your name. So I'm going to put my name. You should put the date, either the date that it's due or the date that you actually took the data might be a little more better. 17/18, so there's the date. And then you should also have your lab partners' names here. And I'm just going to put a little more information about what this spreadsheet is for. Okay, so maybe you have the title of the experiment or whatever you'd like to put here that is more specific. So tutorial video number 1. In the next part, we're going to talk about scientific notation, decimal places, and good practices. So here, scientific notation, you can see here that these concentrations here are very small concentrations. And if you've learned about significant figures before, then you know that the leading zeros here are insignificant, and so they're just taking up a lot of space and making it hard to understand what the concentration really is relative to each other. And so what we're going to do is change this to scientific notation. So up here in the toolbar, you can format this cell as a number, but still that will be a bunch of decimal places. You can do money, you can do time, percentages, etc. I'm going to use scientific notation. Now the nice thing about this is now we can keep the number of significant figures constant. We can compare these numbers to each other, and it also gives you an indication of how Excel sees scientific notation. So this number, 7.5 e to the minus 5, the E stands for, right, that's standing in for times 10 raised to something, right? So 7.5 times 10 raised to the minus 5th. Okay, that's what the E stands for. So that's how you would type in a number and have Excel recognize it as a number. So if I were going to type in 7.5 times 10 to the minus 5, it doesn't know what that means. That is not a number to Excel, okay? This is just text, and you can't do any calculations with that number. So you want to make sure that this is in the correct format so that you can use that number to do calculations. The other thing you'll notice is that in this data here, some of these numbers have 4 digits and some of them have 3, right? The actual number of decimal places provided by the instrument, these are absorbance measurements, and the number of decimal places provided by the instrument tells you the precision of the instrument or how repeatable it is. They are significant digits. So we need to keep 4 decimal places in all of these measurements. But if you just type in 0.7760, right, and hit enter, Excel cuts that 0 off, the last 0. But we know that that is a significant number, so we want to change the number of decimal places that are showing. So I'm going to I'm going to select all of this this data and use this here in the toolbar. This is going to change our number of decimal places. So now I've gotten to 3, but they're all the same, and now I can increase that to 4. And now you can see that the zeros that had been dropped are now placed on those digits. I've already done that down here. Okay, so let's talk about how to do calculations. Okay, there's a bunch of different mathematical functions that you can use in Excel. You can do this one step at a time, or you can use actual functions. So we can execute math, or we can have Excel use functions. So let's look at what that looks like. Let's start with addition. If I want to add two numbers, down here at the bottom of your spreadsheet, you'll see all of the different functions we're going to try. Okay. Again, you should be filling this out as you go along because you're going to have to turn in this spreadsheet. If you need to add numbers, you can do this in two different ways. Anytime you do a mathematical function, you're going to use an equal sign to say whatever appears in this cell, okay, is equal to some math function. Okay, so I have equals 2. I'm going to do trial 1 plus trial 2. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter, and that gives me a number. You can see it gives me the same number of digits that I have up here. Okay, that's fine. Another way to do this, if you don't just have two numbers that you want to highlight and use, maybe you want to add all this whole row, or you want to add all of these together, is that you can use the sum function. Okay, so SUM means add together, right? And anytime you use an Excel function, most of these will pop up here in an autofill, so you can check which one you actually want to use. And then it's going to say number 1, number 2, number 3. So it gives you a hint as to what you need to put inside the parentheses. And so here I could do number 1, comma number 2, comma number 3, and then hit enter, right? And that gives us the same number. Or a little easier way to do that, especially if you have a lot of numbers that you want to use, are to actually select a range of data. Okay, so although there's only two numbers in that sum, I can show you how this could be useful if I want to sum up all of these numbers, right? Now I don't have to select each one. Now I don't have to retype every single number. Okay, but also this gets to the fact that we are doing math in Excel using references to cells instead of typing numbers, right? So you could, if you wanted to, type 0.3258 plus 0.3390, right? And that would give you the same answer as above. But now, maybe I discovered that I transcribed this number wrong from my lab notebook. It's actually 3220. Okay, so I'm going to change this number, and you can see that using the cell references has updated the sum. I don't have to recalculate that sum, but when I just typed in the numbers, I'm going to have to redo that calculation. So what Excel is going to be good for is showing you that you can enter data once, complete a calculation once, and if you find an error in your calculation or an error in your data, it's very easy to fix without having to recalculate. Okay, you're going to get rid of a lot of calculator error at this point. Okay, so you should have using the plus sign, and you should also have using the sum function here for trials 1 and 2 in this concentration. In order to subtract, okay, I'm going to do equals trial 1 minus trial 2. That's pretty straightforward if you need to subtract two numbers. If you need to multiply, then we're going to use the asterisk. That's going to indicate a multiplication function. So it's not an x, because an x is a letter, so it won't recognize that as a mathematical function. okay? And if you need to divide, then you'll use the / that is on the question mark key, okay? So there's our division. Now, counting is another function like the sum function, okay? So I'm going to count the number of numbers that are in this table, okay? So I'm going to say equals count, okay? Again, it brings up an autofill so you can choose the appropriate function. And then inside the parentheses, just like with the sum, it tells you what should be in there. Is it value 1, value 2, value 3, whatever? And so I'm just going to select this whole table. How many measurements did I do? Or how many numbers are in this table? And I have 16. And maybe that's obvious because I have 4 concentrations and 4 trials, right? So 4 times 4 is 16. But if you have a very large amount of data, it might be less straightforward to count those number of things. And we're going to be using this this function when we make histograms. All right. For powers, okay, so we're going to square or cube a number, right? Again, we're going to use the equal sign, and I'm going to select the number that I want and then raise it to the power of 2. So that's going to square it. So that little caret means now you're a superscript, you're going to square that thing, okay? And if you want a square root, you can do this in 2 ways as well. Just mathematically, you can either do the function sqrt. Okay, I'm going to select that and then put the number that I want in there. Or I can take this number and raise it to the 1/2 power, right? Uh-oh, you'll notice that that answer is not the same as I got with the square root function. So let's look at this equation a little closer. Here we have C8 raised to the 1/2 power. But what's actually happening here is Excel is reading this as C8 raised to the 1st power, and then that whole quantity divided by 2. So your order of operations in Excel is going to be the only really tricky part when you do a lot of calculations. So here, in order to alleviate this problem, I'm going to group the 1/2 together so that it's clear that C8 is raised to the 1/2 and not 1 divided by 2. And now I get the same answer as above. Okay. The last mathematical function or number that you might be using in Excel, either in class or in lab, is pi. You might need to use pi. You can just type in 3.14 if you want, but if you want to actually reference pi in some way, Excel sees pi as a function and not a number, which is weird because it is just a number. So here, if I type pi as a function, okay, and just don't put anything inside the parentheses, it will return the value of pi to so many decimal places, like so many that you way more than you could think of off the top of your head. And that's going to make your calculations a lot more accurate. So now I can refer to pi in other calculations if I need to. Finally, for this video, we're going to look at the average and standard deviation. So average and standard deviation are large mathematical functions, and we could use summing and division, right, to calculate the average, or you could use summing and squaring and differences and dividing and the square root function in order to get to standard deviation. Typing out those equations is onerous. So instead, we're going to use the average function, average, and I'm going to average all these trials, okay? And that's going to give us our average, and we can also do the standard deviation. Standard deviation. STDEV is the standard deviation function, and you can highlight those and hit enter.